They called her Scarface, a quiet waitress with a scar stretching across her right cheek. No one knew the faded tattoo on her arm had once helped an entire special forces team survive. Until one day, a veteran walked into the diner, locked eyes with her, and saluted as if standing before a legend. Think you know everything about the people around you? Maybe you haven't looked deep enough. Welcome to our channel. Before we dive into this powerful story, let me know in the comments which city you're watching from today. And if you think stories like this deserve to be heard, hit that subscribe button to support us. The diner, called Maple Diner, sat along an old highway, about an hour's drive south of Kansas City. It wasn't anything special. A weathered wooden sign swayed in the breeze, and dim yellow light spilled through dusty windows. But every morning, the folks of the small town of Redford stopped by ordering pancakes, sipping coffee, chatting briefly, then leaving. And every morning, Ella, the waitress in a dark button-up shirt, quietly did her job. She moved with the precision of a clock, the tray steady in her hands, her eyes focused but avoiding contact. On her right cheek, a scar ran from her temple to near her mouth, a mark that earned her names only kids too young to know better would use. The diner's regulars didn't dislike Ella, but they didn't really notice her either. To them, she was background like the tablecloths or the scratchy jazz from the corner radio, part of the scene. Nothing more. The cook, Carl, a former soldier, sometimes watched her a little longer than the others. He didn't ask questions, but he knew. Some scars don't come from everyday accidents. Once, when the diner was empty, he saw her roll up her sleeve to wipe a table, and for a moment, an old tattoo on her left wrist flashed a bird clutching a dagger. The ink so faded it nearly vanished with time. Ella quickly pulled her sleeve down, her gaze sharp as a gust of wind. Carl never mentioned it again, but he noticed how she tensed at the sound of distant helicopters, or how her eyes lingered when soldiers stopped by. She moved like a shadow, skilled, swift, always dodging attention, never clumsy, never spilling, never making a customer call twice. She knew who liked black coffee, who needed sugar-free syrup, and who hated the sausage and egg plate. It was all memorized, as if she'd been trained for it. But when someone tried to chat too long, she'd nod lightly and slip away. Mornings in Redford were nothing special. Yet in their routine, Ella became essential. Amid short conversations, the clink of plates, and the smell of brewing coffee, there was a silence like the undertone of an unplayed song, a silence that didn't invite questions but couldn't be ignored. Her scar caught the faint light from the windows each sunrise. No one stared at it, but no one fully ignored it either. It was a mark she couldn't hide, yet no one dared ask about. In Redford, people preferred silence over facing the truth. Once, a kid asked his mom about Ella's scar. The mother shook her head, whispering, "Don't ask grown-ups about things that aren't your business." Ella overheard, and she gave a faint smile, a flicker like dust on a window, gone before it could be seen clearly. But that night, after closing, she stayed late, wiping every table, every smudge, as if trying to erase questions she didn't want to answer herself. Why was she here? Why would someone like her, clearly not born to wait tables, choose to hide in a place this remote? Some might think she was running from something. But no one knew. Some people aren't running, they've just survived. And surviving doesn't always mean living on in the way you're supposed to. Ella chose Maple Diner like someone picks a porch to wait out the rain temporary. Quiet. Far from what used to be real. But even shadows can't hide forever. And when the past decides to return, it doesn't knock. It walks in like a stranger or an old friend you no longer recognize, and when it does, every scar starts to speak. That morning, it was raining, the quiet kind of rain Kansas often sees in early April, each drop falling steadily on the asphalt, creating a faint hum like the breath of time. Maple Diner was open as usual, its lights casting a glow through water-streaked windows, like a faded photograph. Ella wiped down table 3, her steps silent, her eyes as always alert, cautious, but not meeting anyone's gaze. The bell above the door jingled softly. An old man stepped in, wearing a worn baseball cap, a dark green jacket with rusted buttons, and water-soaked combat boots. He paused for a moment, scanning the diner not for an empty table, but as if searching for something long gone. Then his eyes stopped. Ella was still facing away, standing by the counter, as she turned toward the kitchen, a tray of empty glasses in hand. Her left arm briefly revealed the faded tattoo, a bird clutching a dagger. A memory flickered. The old man froze, his bony hand tightening on his wooden cane. Wind carried the scent of rain and dust through the half-open door, but he didn't move. His eyes stayed fixed on her wrist, where the ashen tattoo had just appeared. Then, without a word, he walked straight to table 7, sat down, back straight, eyes never leaving the counter. Ella didn't notice anything unusual. To her, he was just another stranger. She approached, set a glass of water in front of him, and spoke as she did every day. "What can I get you this morning, sir?" But he didn't answer right away. His gaze lingered on her wrist. Then he spoke softly, as if afraid to snap a thread hanging between them. "Raven Squadron, there are still survivors." The words were like metal grazing thin ice. Ella froze. She didn't look at him, didn't react immediately. But for a fleeting moment, her hand holding the tray trembled. "Ghost bird," he said next, his eyes still on her. "No need for confirmation. I remember how you ran through gunfire. No one flew as low as you did. Now." Ella's eyes met his face. Something old, almost erased from her memory, came back, not his face, but the way he looked, not probing, not pitying, not afraid, just knowing. She sat down across from him. No order taken. No one does that with a customer. But that morning, she did. Outside, the rain kept falling. Inside, plates clinked, and the coffee machine hissed faintly. But at table 7, there was a unique silence. Ella didn't ask who he was. She knew only someone who'd been in the same place, in a moment erased from history, could remember that name, Ghostbird. How long had it been since she'd heard that call sign? 5 years, 10. Or since the last time a helicopter went down in the hills of the southeast. "You're the last one from Echo Station?" she asked. He nodded. "I thought you didn't make it back." Ella didn't respond, and she looked out the window. Light reflected off the scar on her right cheek. "So did I," she said softly. Her voice held no sadness, no blame, just a report delivered decades late. Max, his name, pulled an old silver coin from his jacket pocket. Etched on it was their unit's symbol, the kind never officially issued. He placed it on the table, sliding it gently toward her. "You were our last signal. None of us thought you were still alive." Ella laid her hand on the coin. It felt cold, like a gust from the past brushing her palm. She closed her eyes for a brief moment, then opened them. No questions, no denials. The past had found her through a look, a name only her unit knew, and a coin, bearing the mark of those who never existed on paper. And so, in a small Midwestern diner, a man who thought he'd forgotten everything recognized a ghost. A ghost who'd flown through the dark, guided them when navigation systems failed, and was abandoned by the system as if she'd never existed. But that morning, that ghost had a name again. Ghostbird. And when her name returned, her story began to step out of the shadows. That afternoon, the rain had stopped. A silver-gray sky draped over Redford like a cloth covering memories yet to be uncovered. Ella stood on the diner's back porch next to an old wooden chair facing an empty lot. Max sat beside her, holding a cold cup of coffee, his eyes not fixed on anything in particular. They sat in silence for a long while. The wind slipped through the space between them, carrying the scent of damp earth and the rustle of dry leaves. Then Max spoke, his voice low, not needing to ask, "We thought you were dead. The report said the chopper went down. No one came back." Ella didn't turn to him, but she nodded faintly. That was the plan. No survivors. No one to tell the story. The unit could be buried with its secret. Her voice was steady, emotionless, like reciting a report memorized long ago. But in the pauses, something else lingered, a weariness too deep for words. Max sat up straighter, gazing at the barren field ahead. "I always thought, if anyone could make it through that zone, it'd be Ghostbird. But then every trace of you vanished, like someone wanted to erase you from memory." Ella gave a faint laugh, not joyful, but the sound of someone recognizing a truth that was always there. "Not everyone wants the story told," she said. "People only remember victories. No one wants to hear about failures, especially ones kept hidden." Max shook his head, setting his coffee on the wooden floor. "You're wrong. You didn't bring failure back. You brought 11 survivors. The whole Bravo crew. If you hadn't flown under radar, we wouldn't have seen the next sunrise." Ella's left hand tightened slightly. "I didn't save everyone." Max looked at her. "No one saves everyone, but you saved those who could live. And then you disappeared. No medals, no funeral, no goodbye." Silence settled, like a void between two pasts that didn't align. Ella tilted her head, eyes still fixed on the distance. "I'm not sure I wanted to come back. The people here, they don't know. They see the scar and think I'm the problem." Max nodded slowly. "I know that feeling. When people look through you, they like you never existed. But sometimes, then it only takes one person to remember." He pulled a carefully folded piece of paper from his jacket. "I kept a list of the survivors. Your name's not on it. They said you were gone. But I didn't believe it because I heard your voice, over the radio. One last time. Head 270, stay low. Don't look back." I never forgot that voice. Ella didn't speak. A breeze passed, stirring her hair. The scar on her right cheek stood out sharper in the slanting afternoon light. Max turned to her, looking at her the way you'd look at a legend, now wearing the face of an ordinary person. "You know, Ghostbird. People need to hear the real story, not just about victories, but about the nameless sacrifices. People like you. You don't have to stay hidden forever." Ella lowered her head, eyes closing. In her mind, the final moments before the chopper erupted in flames flashed clearly, hands reaching, voices shouting over the radio, a sky lit with streaks of gunfire. She still heard it every night, and she knew. She wasn't the only one carrying those echoes. You think people would care? A waitress with a scar, a call sign no one remembers, and a mission never acknowledged. Max smiled, an old, steady smile. Maybe they won't understand, but they'll feel it, because the truth always finds a way to speak. A truck rumbled by, kicking up swirls of red dust. Ella watched it, then stood. She didn't say more. But her steps had changed, not faster, not slower, and just for the first time in years. She didn't try to avoid the eyes of those inside the diner, and when she returned to table 7, Max was still there. His gaze followed her, not with curiosity, but as if he'd just handed back a piece of unwritten history. A piece of history, ready to be rewritten. Not with guns, not with medals, but with the presence of someone once erased now stepping out of the shadows. The next noon, sunlight streamed through Maple Diner's windows as usual soft gold, enough to illuminate the thin dust on the old vinyl booths. The diner was busy, with customers coming and going steadily. Familiar conversations about gas prices, the town's high school football team, or the changing weather hummed on, as if nothing had shifted. Ella worked the tables like always. Her hands were steady, her smile faint, her gaze landing exactly where it needed to. No more, no less. But Max wasn't like the others. He sat quietly at table 7, his soldier's cap folded neatly beside him, watching her with unmistakable respect. Not pity, but gratitude. The kind soldiers share after surviving a battlefield together. He stayed there a long time, ordering only a black coffee, no sugar, nothing more. He was waiting, and then, no one in the diner was prepared. No one could have imagined what was coming. Max rose slowly. The diner was still noisy, clinking plates, laughter, the hiss of the coffee machine. But then he walked to the center of the room near the counter where Ella was wiping a table. He stopped, stood tall, shoulders squared, his right hand raised to his forehead. A salute, precise, military, unhurried, unshowy. In that moment, every sound in the diner seemed to vanish. A silence, uncommanded but spreading fast, like an unspoken order. Customers stopped talking. The cook froze mid-chop. A young boy paused mid-bite. All eyes turned. They didn't understand what was happening. They didn't know why this old man was saluting a waitress called Scarface for years. But the gravity of his gesture, no one dared laugh, no one dared interrupt. Ella stood still. For a second, she looked at him. At the salute not for the woman with the scar, but for the one once called Ghost Bird. No explanation needed, no words required, just one act enough to change how the entire room saw a person. She didn't return the salute, didn't raise her hand, didn't bow. But her eyes were different, no longer dodging, no longer shrinking. They met Max, acknowledging, accepting that she'd been called by her true name. Once more, Max lowered his hand, nodded slightly. Then they returned to table 7, sitting as if nothing extraordinary had happened. But the diner wasn't the same. No one asked, no one accused. Yet at table 2, a silver-haired man removed his hat, holding it to his chest. At table 5, an older woman quietly placed a hand on her grandson's shoulder, as if teaching him something words couldn't convey. And from behind the counter, Carl, the cook who'd served in the Middle East, gave a subtle nod, saying nothing. No one in the diner knew the full truth, but everyone felt something serious, something real, had just unfolded. Not a prank, not a mistake, but a recognition, a ritual without invitations, yet no one who witnessed it could leave unchanged. Ella returned to the counter. The tray was still in her hand, but her breathing was different. Her steps were steady, but no longer hiding. And in the eyes of the customers, for the first time in years, she wasn't Scarface, not the overlooked shadow of a distant past. She was a person who'd stood in the eye of a storm, lost everything, and was still here, holding hot coffee steady, holding her silence, and now, holding a truth slowly being restored, not with gunfire, but with respect. With eyes that no longer looked past her, with a salute, That silenced the room. Rumors spread quietly in Redford. No one spoke openly. No articles were written. But after that noon, when an old veteran stood and saluted the scarred waitress, people began to look at her differently. No more snickers behind her back. No more whispers about her long sleeves in summer or the scar that didn't look like an accident. They didn't understand, but they began to respect. And then, the past didn't just return with a salute. It came back with deliberate steps, with figures pushing open the diner's door as if they knew exactly who they were looking for. Friday morning, 3 men in civilian clothes entered Maple Diner. They didn't ask for a table, didn't glance at the menu. They scanned the room once, then walked together to the counter. The man in the middle, tall, trim, with graying hair, stopped in front of Ella, pulled out a black leather wallet, and opened it, not to pay, but to show a worn military ID, its edges frayed by time. "Reeves," he asked, voice low but heard by everyone in the diner. Ella didn't answer right away, but her eyes changed. She recognized the voice and the tone. The man didn't need confirmation. He nodded, then produced a small metal box. Etched on its lid was the raven symbol, a crow with spread wings against a silver shield, an emblem erased from all records after 2009. "We're authorized to return this to you. Original files, mission logs, maps, satellite imagery, survival reports, and," he paused briefly, "a commendation letter never delivered." The diner held its breath. Carl the cook wiped his hands clean, stepped out from the kitchen, and stood behind the counter without a word. A few customers rose, not loudly, not out of curiosity. They just stood, as if sensing something sacred unfolding. The younger officer opened the box. Inside were weathered documents, neatly arranged a hand-marked map, satellite photos dotted with symbols, hurried notes in black ink, and a list 11 names marked survived. At the bottom, a line pilot Ghostbird lost signal 321 hours, status unknown. Ella reached out, touching the paper. No one needed to say more. In her hands was undeniable proof that she wasn't just a survivor. She was the one who ensured others survived. The pilot of a mission no one wanted to mention, but couldn't forget. Another man, older, entered the diner, broad-shouldered, slow-moving, his faded army jacket worn thin, a former colonel. He didn't come to talk. He simply approached Ella, stood tall, and saluted again. But this time, he wasn't alone. The 2 younger officers behind him saluted in unison, perfectly timed. 3 salutes. A silence spread like a wave from the room's center. Then, one by one, the people in the diner stood. No one was asked. No one was forced. They just stood to bear witness. No one in that room saw Ella as just a waitress anymore. No one thought the scar on her face was merely a mark. It was evidence of a war, a sacrifice, and something greater than titles or ranks. Ella didn't cry. She didn't smile. She only nodded faintly, as if confirming she'd reclaimed what was taken, without ever demanding it. No one asked her to tell the story. There were no speeches, no formal ceremony. But everyone in the diner that day, from the other servers to regular customers to the kid still clutching a milkshake, knew. She wasn't just the woman who carried trays and wiped tables. She was the one who held life together in the midst of hell. And now, that past was no longer a burden. It was the truth laid out plainly, unashamed, on the table of a small Midwestern diner. From that moment, Ella was no longer invisible. She was a living witness to a battle no one dared speak of, but everyone felt. She didn't need to speak anymore. She only needed to stand there, and the truth would speak for itself. A week after that noon, The side gate of Whiteman Air Force Base opened for a silver-gray civilian car rolling quietly into the restricted area. The driver wore no uniform, no insignia, no name tag. Just a woman with her hair tied back, in a simple canvas jacket, the same scar still etched on her right cheek. Ella stepped out, holding a slim file not large, not heavy, but carrying something few young officers in the base had experienced from a mission erased from all records. She wasn't here to command, not to reclaim rank or title. She returned as a shadow that once glided through battlefields, now a guide for the next generation. Inside the tactical training wing, a group of young officers waited. They knew little about her, only that she was an unofficial field advisor, specially approved. But when the door opened and Ella walked in, silence fell. No one ordered them to stand. They all did. Instinct. One of them, a short-haired female lieutenant with sharp eyes, raised a brief salute. Not for a superior, but for something beyond rank. Ella nodded slightly, then spoke in a calm, clear voice, not loud, but resonating in the quiet briefing room. I'm not here to talk about glory. I'm here because there are things you were never taught, and I can't forget. That day, she began training with old mistakes, falsified maps, jammed signals, altitude decisions that led to losses. Pointing at the projector screen. She didn't lecture like a textbook, but recounted moments that caused casualties. No embellishment. No heroics. Just truth, crisp, clear, unflinching. And that bluntness made everyone sit still. They didn't stare at her scar, they looked into the eyes of someone who'd faced what no training manual could fully capture. By afternoon, she walked to the tarmac. An HH-60G Pavehawk, a modern version of the helicopter she once flew, was prepping for takeoff. The co-pilot sat on the left, the right seat was empty. She was invited aboard, not to fly, but to observe. No one expected her to accept, but she climbed in, strapped herself, and gazed at the runway as if she'd stood there, in another life. The helicopter rolled, then lifted. The rotor's hum sliced through the air, her hair shifting slightly. She said nothing, just looked down. Below were the golden fields of late spring, the narrow roads winding back to Redford, where a diner with foggy windows and a jingling bell waited each morning. She saw it from afar, a tiny speck, but distinct, like a memory taking shape. A town once her hiding place, now a place where people knew she existed. The pilot asked, "Want to take the controls?" Ma'am Ella shook her head, eyes still on the ground. "No. My job now is to teach others how to fly." And then she smiled for the first time. Unforced, a small smile, enough to say she'd reclaimed what was lost. Not a title, not a rank, but a reason to be. She didn't need fanfare, didn't need ceremonies, just to fly again, not to lead, but to guide. As the helicopter climbed, the late afternoon light hit the scar on her cheek, making it no longer a wound, but a marker. A symbol, a map, and Ella Ghostbird, the woman once buried with a classified mission, became a nameless teacher in the formal system, a living soul in the present, a living map to bring the young ones home. And for her, that was enough. Scars are no longer shameful. They are maps. Scars aren't a disgrace anymore, they're maps to lead others home. If you believe silent heroes still walk among us, please share this story with others. Subscribe to the channel to catch more stories that touch the heart. And if you've ever met a ghost bird in your life, leave a comment below. We're listening, and we cherish every memory.